That's the kind of pattern we actually need, Tim. And it's just not us. It seems like drought is really impacting a lot of the country right now, and it's been pretty dry for especially the southeast.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be difficult, I think, to fix this, and maybe eventually we'll get a pattern change, but it doesn't seem to be the case right now. We did have, just a couple minutes left here. We got some news from the Hurricane Center today.
Yeah.
We wanted to chat about that. They're going to change subtly, somewhat, the way that they present their hurricane cone. And I kind of had to look at this carefully to see, okay, what's different here?
Yeah.
But it has to do with the products that they're going to shade on the maps. So they're actually going to be including tropical storm warnings, hurricane warnings for inland areas, not just along the coast. That should hopefully communicate a little bit more risk for areas away from the storm. And they're also going to keep that cone shaded all the way through. They used to kind of de-emphasize the day 3 through 5 range, and it looks like they're going to stop doing that, as I understand it.
Yeah, so for people looking at this, you're probably saying, well, I don't see anything different. But you're right. If you look at the advisories, the watches and warnings, it kind of shows more the track of the impacts, Tim, not the center, which is what the cone is showing. It's where the center goes. And I think that whether people on purpose, it's not, that's just human nature. They thought if they weren't in the cone, they were safe. But when you look at those watches and advisories, Tim, like for Florida, this is Milton. This is not a current map, by the way. This is for old Milton. It shows the whole Florida peninsula in some type of tropical watch or warning, even though the eye is going to be in the middle of the state. So it's supposed to imply that, yeah, that's where the eye is, but the impacts will be across the entire state.
And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to fix everything, but probably just acknowledging that, yes, there are dangers outside that cone. We know that in North Carolina, Western North Carolina wasn't inside most of that cone toward the end of things.
Nope.
And they had the worst impacts out of pretty much everybody in the hurricane. So these are all things that we're not talking about them right now, but they're announcing them. I believe they will be taking effect for this season. Is that right?
That is correct. So this will be in effect for this upcoming hurricane season, which starts on June 1st in the Atlantic and May 15th in the Eastern Pacific. So, I'm just looking at this graphic, and, this Milton made landfall near Tampa, and at the time, Charleston, South Carolina was under a tropical storm watch. So that just goes to show you how far the impacts are from where the center of the storm actually went. So I think it'll be a good thing, Tim. It'll make our jobs hopefully a little bit easier. We'll see. I think people will still be confused, but that's all the time we have for today, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Stay cool out there as we get into the heat, and also good luck with the pollen.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on WCNC Plus right after our Weather Impact show. We actually have the superintendent of CMS. They are speaking right now, a CMS board meeting. So let's go to this live right now.
In JROTC, but I am interested in potentially pursuing a career in the military, and we give them access to that assessment. That's really important because students that have access to taking this assessment may have an opportunity to enlist at a higher ranking, depending on their score. And I'll also add, I remember Dr. Witherspoon asked this question last year. I gave an incorrect answer, and then I was corrected, that based on the number of years in JROTC means that they enter the military at a different rank. I think both of you bounced and asked that. It was you? One of you all had that question. So we have a growing number of students. The other thing I do want to add, too, is I think a lot of people think just because you're in JROTC that you're immediately going to the military. We have several students that are in JROTC just because of all of the added benefits. They do a lot of life work, character building, discipline, all of that. And a lot of those students get amazing scholarships to go to Ivy League schools. I mean, any school that you can possibly imagine.
That's it.
One other thing that I'll add, sorry, I know I'm going on and on, is that the students, because they have such a great connection with their instructors and with their cohorts, I was out visiting at Rocky River, happened to be there, and one of the cadets was home on break. And I was just asking, is this typical that they come? And they said, yes, all the time. The cadets, after they leave, they come back and speak to the students about their experiences.
Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, how does that, if they're at a school, in the school, and they're interested in Marines, but their school is offering Army, how does that work? Is that a limiting factor? I don't think it is, but I just want that, the way this is set up.
That's a great question that I do not know the answer to, but I'll be happy to get it for you.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a question about a different question about the militaries, the ASVAB. The goal is that the percentage of students that are scoring 31 or higher on the ASVAB, and am I looking at this correctly in terms of, I'm looking at slide 8 that talks about, it has the 2% on it. Is that, and then I'm looking at slide 11 that has 0% for the ASVAB.
Yes. So, okay, so for slide 8, what you are looking at here is students who are in I believe this one is our seniors. See all the indicators. So basically what this is saying is of these students, 48% of them have earned the indicator for being grade level proficient. That's one of the ones that they would have met. For ASVAB, 2% of these 12th grade students that we're taking a look at who are projected to be at 85%, being on track to be enrolled, enlisted, and employed, 2% of them have taken and passed the ASVAB. Does that make sense?
So then how do we know what the data is of the number of students that take the ASVAB are scoring 31 or higher?
Yep. We're measuring the number of students earning 31 or higher on the ASVAB assessment, and we're hoping to increase from 237 students to 250 students this year. So to date, we have 460 of the 959 students have earned a 31% or higher on the ASVAB administration. But the test administration will continue through the end of April. So as of right now, we have 460 of the 959 29 who've earned a 31 or higher, but students are still testing through the end of April. So when we have our OBEA sessions that you've heard me talk about for each of the goals and each of the strategies, every other week, the person that is responsible for that particular strategy meets with our cabinet and other district leaders, and they go through their WIGs, their wildly important goals, and all of the measures. So they let us know if they're on track, off track, based on the indicators that are underneath for each of these strategies. At this level, we're reporting out on the big overall, but at our OBEA, they're going through each of the specific metrics, and then we have a strategic conversation similar to this about how we can remove barriers to increase success.
So I guess in particular, like, what are the strategies for that particular indicator that increases the score to the goal of 31 or higher?
Offering the assessment more often. So in the past, we've only offered it one semester. In the past, we've not offered it at every single school. We now offer it at every single school, first semester and second semester. And the other strategy, or tactic, I guess I should say, is that we now are ensuring that our JROTC instructors are aware of the assessment and what's going to be assessed in terms of supporting students with passing the assessment.
Thank you. Dr. Witherspoon?
Yeah, just have one question, which I'm glad to see that around that all schools have an ACT plan. How do you track whether all the schools are implementing that plan with fidelity?
Yes, so our assistant superintendents of school performance, we have 3 of them that support all of our high schools. Each of our schools, based on the goals that the board has set in their school improvement plan, they have a goal that's related to one of the 4 goals that's applicable to their school. So it's tracked there through the school improvement process. The assistant superintendent of school performance is working with them in terms of monitoring that, and the person at the district level that's responsible for that specific strategy reports out on that at our OBEA sessions. So it's tracked in multiple different ways. The other thing that I would say is that you've heard me talk a little bit about the data report outs that we do for high schools, because this is one of their goals. Our high schools are actually reporting out on the number of indicators, the number of students, that are meeting at least one of the indicators that's enumerated here in the goal that the board has. So it's monitored at varying levels, and then opportunities to work together to ensure that they're making sure that they're consistent and offering opportunities for students so that they will meet indicators in order to be prepared.
Thank you.
I just got 2 more questions. On slide 58, we talk about the college and career promise. It says that it is off track because we'll increase from 20%, comprehensive high schools offering will increase from 20% in 24-25 to 64% in 25-26. And it says that we're off track there.
Which, I'm sorry.
Slide 58.
Sometimes
It's the dual enrollment course access.
Thank you. Dual enrollment. Making sure I have what you have. All right, off track. So dual enrollment course access, percentage of CMS, is that what you're taking a
Yes,
look
it will
at?
increase from
Yes.
20% to 64% in 25-26. They're saying we're
Yes.
off track on that. But I'm not quite sure I understand what the strategic adjustments that'll be made and kind of where we are,
Yes.
because we're in the 25-26 school year now.
Yes, thank you very much. So Dr. Payne actually reported on this last week and specifically pointed out that we have 15 Central Piedmont academies, which is one short of our goal. So our goal was to have our Central Piedmont academies in 16 schools, and so we're saying that we're off track because our goal was for it to be in 16 schools, so we're one short. So our goal was to increase from 20% to 64% in the 25-26 school year, but our actual was 60%. So a little bit of information about that. We started our CP academies in the 22-23 school year with 3 schools. We increased to 5 in the 23-24. Then we were able to secure 12 schools in the 24-25 school year, and our goal, again, was to have 16 this year, but we were only able to get 15. So we're continuing to implement some strategies to see that number increase next year. A little bit more information. Class offerings based on enrollment continue to be a barrier. The minimum of 15 students are needed for a course to run. So if we don't have 15 students in a course, then we can't, it's cost prohibitive for us to be able to offer it. So one of the strategic adjustments, to answer your question, is allowing our principals now to map out and secure year-long plans for their course offerings instead of just looking at things semester by semester. So starting in this past November, December, all the way up until now, assistant superintendents as well as counselors and principals have really been working, not just looking at what courses you're going to offer for a semester at a time, so next year, fall and spring, but really looking at it in totality. You know how I kind of talked about earlier, a student getting, like, these are the graduation requirements that you need, and checking it off? The same thing with our mindset, being really strategic in the way that we're laying out our schedule in order to offer that. Now, I will say in full transparency, Crystal Hill has never done a high school schedule. It is a work of art. I don't know how they do it. And they're giggling. Laura Rosenbach's probably the queen of doing it. But so you're looking at the interest of students, looking at their career interest inventory. You're looking at available staff and allotments, and then looking at how can you stack these courses to create clear pathways for students to be able to graduate with all the things, including graduation requirements. And then not just allotments, but the available staff that you have to teach said courses. So that is a work, it is masterful for them to be able to do that. So I say these things like it's real simple. It is not. But it takes a lot of thinking ahead, a lot of strategy, which is why I mentioned they've been working on next year's schedule since November, this past November, looking ahead.
You actually led me to my last question. You use those particular words. How do we know that there is, or what strategy are we making sure there's alignment with the student interest, the inventory? The last piece that you did not speak about was the industry needs, and how those three things are aligned.
Yes. So if you if you can go to that tier 2, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 credentials. So we work very closely with Charlotte Works to make sure that we're taking a look at the industries that are specific to the Mecklenburg County area, as well as industry needs across the state. And our CTE team works very closely with those folks to make sure that our pathways and the credentials that we're offering are things that students can actually use regionally. Because obviously we want students to graduate. We want students to graduate with the specific credentials, but we also want them to stay and work here. We have It is a challenge. We have a workforce challenge, and the biggest, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools is the best answer to our workforce challenge that we have. We are workforce development. So we work very closely, again, with those specialists to make sure that we are preparing students for those jobs. A couple of years ago, we started with the help of one of our executives in residence, the enrolled the City of Charlotte Signing Day. I'm not going to call what it is. 'Cause I can't think of it.
E2E.
Thank you.
E2E, yeah.
E2E, yes.
Yeah, E2E.
With the City of Charlotte. And then today at the Futures Fair, I had an opportunity to talk with some of their HR folks, and they were just saying that they are so pleased with how well prepared students are when they sign on to work with the City of Charlotte. And they also said that they are so pleased with the feedback, because we go through a cadence of asking them, all right, you had these students sign on, how are things going? What are some things that we need to work on right now for that program, which is huge, and they were saying they are strong applicants. So making sure that we're having that feedback loop on the things that we can do to get better, to better prepare students, not just for the industry, but just to be prepared to work in general. All of those things, which goes back to that wheel that I showed you earlier, making sure all of those four pieces are in place.
Any more for FY 26, 27?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As we plan for year 3 of our strategic plan, I'm reminded of where we started. Just a few years ago, I said, when I had the opportunity to become your superintendent, and they were saying they are strong applicants. So making sure that we're having that feedback loop on the things that we can do to get better, to better prepare students, not just for the industry, but just to be prepared to work in general. All of those things, which goes back to that wheel that I showed you earlier, making sure all of those four pieces are in place.
Any more for FY 26, 27?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As we plan for year 3 of our strategic plan, I'm reminded of where we started. Just a few years ago, I said, when I had the opportunity to become your superintendent, I said, when I had the opportunity to become your superintendent,
All right, guys, having some issues here. We're going to get these things corrected. We'll be back in 2 minutes. We'll see you then. All right, everyone, we are back, and we finally have our shot from the Board of Education meeting at CMS. Let's go to this right now, live.
3 jobs to make ends meet. We cannot expect teachers to be fully focused on instruction while they're also worried about whether they have enough money to live. If our goal is stability in schools and long-term gains in student achievement, then we must ensure that our teachers have the financial security and support that they need. Investing in our people isn't just the right thing to do, it's the most impactful thing that we can do for students. Okay. So let's take a look at our proposed operating budget, which funds our day-to-day operations of the district, things like salaries, benefits, transportation, utilities, and instructional support. The operating budget, proposed operating budget is $1.97 billion and supports approximately 139,000 students. This slide shows both where the funding comes from and how it's used. One important thing to note is that we do not have a state budget yet, not for this year, 25-26, and not for next year, 26-27. So for planning purposes, we made some assumptions. We assumed a 3% salary increase and a 4.09 increase in benefits. These are planning assumptions only, and this uncertainty is important when we talk about why some funds are not yet allocated. Charter school enrollment impacts our budget because local funds follow the student to the charter school. Any increase in charter enrollment increases the amount that we are required to pass through to the charter. So before we started requesting additional funds, we looked internally. As we shared earlier, we consistently hear from our employees that compensation and support matter, and we are committed to prioritizing those areas. So we ask ourselves, where can we make adjustments and trade-offs to redirect funding toward these priorities? This is, of course, supported by the board's Guardrail 4 that states, when ensuring all schools have teachers equipped to deliver high-quality instruction, the superintendent shall neither neglect targeted nor comprehensive strategies for teacher recruitment, retention, and engagement. So through the work that I mentioned earlier, we've identified approximately $6.6 million in trade-offs through central office reductions, vacant positions, and shared cost models for digital platforms. These decisions were not easy, and we recognize that every role in the organization is important and contributes to support our students. But we are not funded to do everything, so we have to prioritize. And when we have to make those choices, we prioritize investments that most directly support our schools, our classrooms, and our learning, student learning. Okay. This section covers the proposed operational county appropriation. It represents the local investment that Mecklenburg is on three main areas, starting with our employees. The first item in that category is certified supplement increases. This is where you see our continued commitment and the county's continued commitment to retaining our teachers. The 5% supplement increase is consistent with what we've requested over the previous 3 years, and we work toward making teacher pay more competitive in our local market. What you will find unique about Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools and Mecklenburg County is that we have continued to invest in our educators even when times are tight. Many districts across the state are cutting positions or have not been able to adjust their local supplements. So we want to acknowledge and thank both the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners for their continued commitment to invest.
All right, guys, we will continue to monitor this CMS Board of Education meeting, having some issues with the link that was sent out. Let's go to CMS, though. Earlier, there was a news conference about the budget and, of course, the presentation that was coinciding with that. Let's go to that right now. All right, folks, having an issue with our system software as a whole. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break and come right back. All right, folks, we're back. We're going to go back to this budget presentation from CMS. Let's go to this presentation right now.
And engagements. We've invited you here ahead of tonight's board meeting to learn about the proposed budget for the 26-27 school year. Our purpose for sharing this information is to provide you with additional time to learn and understand the facts detailed within the proposed budget so that you can accurately report what will be shared with the public this evening. Please note, all information shared during this press conference is strictly embargoed until the conclusion of tonight's 6 p.m. Board of Education meeting. To support your coverage, we have provided copies of the slide deck as well as budget talking point flashcards. Now, I will introduce Superintendent Dr. Crystal Hill, who will begin with the strategic vision behind this budget. Then, Chief Financial Officer Kelly Klutz will provide a formal presentation of the budget highlights and figures. And Jeff Thompson will provide information as to how we will resource our goals and guardrails. Following their remarks, Assistant Communications Officer Tom Miner will lead us through 2 rounds of Q&A. Joining us at the front table to assist with those questions is Tim Ivey, Chief Operations Officer. We ask that you keep your questions focused on today's budget proposal. Any outside inquiries should be sent to our Media Relations inbox for a direct follow-up. We would also like to acknowledge any board members that are in this space. Our leadership team is here today to provide the clarity you need to report on the budget that is more than just a financial proposal. It is a strategic investment in endless possibilities that start with CMS. With that, I will turn it over to our Superintendent of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, Dr. Crystal Hill.
Thank you, Dr. Esposito, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for being with us this afternoon. We appreciate you being here. Also would like to thank you for honoring the trust that we have in you to hold this information until after we've had an opportunity to present it to the Board of Education this evening. So as we plan for year 3 of our strategic plan, I'm reminded of where we started. I said just a few years ago, and I still say today, that we live in an absolutely amazing community, a community that is committed to the children of Mecklenburg County. The children of Charlotte-Mecklenburg deserve the very best, specifically the very best education. And of course, having the best education means that it is required that we have the very best educators in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. 3 years in, I am encouraged. We don't have to go searching for what's required for our children to have the best education because we already know what it is. Our school leaders, teachers, teacher assistants, coaches, counselors, social workers, bus drivers, front office staff, and the list goes on and on. Every single one of us has had at least one, but probably more, educators who have all made a difference in our lives. They've contributed to where we are today, and they have sacrificed in many, many ways for our well-being. So we know what is required. There should be no surprise when you see my budget recommendation and funding expansion request from the county this year. You will see continued priority on the investment in our educators, an investment representing not just a budget allocation, but a value statement that our community believes educators are the most important factor in student success and deserve to be compensated, supported, and celebrated accordingly. And this year, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools has continued to make trade-offs to make an increased investment in our educational system. For example, we have streamlined services and some central office positions. They've been eliminated. Employees impacted still have positions. They are just serving in a different capacity. Another example, we have reviewed digital platforms and eliminated some of what we were providing in terms of duplicative services. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools is doing its part. But you're not going to see in my budget recommendation tonight an allocation of those dollars. And here's why. I am uncertain about the implications of what could be some very promising upcoming state decisions for educator pay. If a raise for educator pay in the state budget is higher than the 3% that we have assumed in our budget recommendation, and we all hope for that, We would need some of the funds from our identified trade-offs to ensure our locally funded educators receive the increase as well. Here's what I mean. The majority of our educator positions that are shown here in green are funded by the state of North Carolina. However, we are incredibly fortunate to live in a community in which our county commissioners provide local funding for additional educator positions that are shown here in blue. Most districts don't have the level of support that we have here, so we are so grateful for our county commissioners and their continued support. There are some additional positions that are funded with federal funds. If those funds are available, which they are, those are shown here in purple. Here's the part that gets a little tricky. If the state approves a raise for our educators that's higher than the 3% that we've assumed in our budget, which we certainly hope they do, then state funding will be provided for that raise for educators, only those that are shown here in the green. State funding would not be provided for the educators that are locally funded, which you see in the blue. So the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools budget, specifically some of the funds that were made available through our trade-offs, would need to pay for the raises for our locally funded positions. For the federally funded positions, those are the ones that you see in purple, the situation is a little bit different. Typically, federal funding does not increase just because salaries increase. Instead, those same federal dollars simply just don't stretch as far. In other words, we lose the purchasing power with our federal dollars and the capacity within those grants. That's common practice, it's something that we're used to all the time, but essentially we have to use those federal funds to adjust for those folks that are paid with federal dollars. So as a responsible steward of the funds designated to provide the very best for our students, I will not make a formal recommendation for this use until I know for sure what the state decision will require. While I know this creates a little bit of uncertainty for the moment, I firmly believe it is the fiscally responsible thing to do. Regarding the county expansion funding request, I want to be clear. I am requesting what I believe is appropriate for the county to do its part. While we all want more for our educators, including our county commissioners, the county has also the responsibilities and obligations that must be funded. There's one other thing that I'd like to note that you're going to hear in just a minute. I'm recommending a 10-cent increase to school lunches. If approved, elementary lunches will be $2.85 next year, and secondary lunches would be $3.10. This is due to rising labor and food costs. There would continue to be no charge for breakfast because we have universal breakfast here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. In our schools that are designated as CEP schools, there would continue to be no charge for breakfast and lunch. So I will close with this summary. Children deserve the very best. The very best educators are required. We have made trade-offs to identify additional funding. I'm going to wait to make a formal recommendation for the use of those funds until I know what our state budget will look like. And I ask that as a community, we continue to both act and advocate together to attract, develop, retain, and celebrate exceptional educators who transform students' lives, both through increased compensation and in other ways as well. I will now turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Kelly Klutz, to provide you with more details about what I just shared for my 26-27 budget recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. So let's get started reviewing the 26-27 superintendent's budget recommendation. And we're going to start with the CMS placemat, as we always do. You've seen it many times, but it's important because it's how we build the budget. So the board sets the goals, the superintendent sets the strategy, and the budget funds that work. The superintendent's recommended budget is built around a few key principles. It's student-focused. It reflects a continuous improvement mindset meaning that we're always looking for ways to operate more efficiently and redirect funding to higher impact strategies. It prioritizes recruitment and retaining our high-quality staff, and it continues to invest in capital and operational needs to reduce risk to the organization. So we'll walk through Dr. Hill's recommendation now. You've seen this slide many times as well, so I won't spend much time here. This is simply the reminder that the budget is built to fund the work that supports the strategic plan and the board's goals. So later in the presentation, Chief Thompson will walk you through in more detail how the budget funds that work and the theory of change behind it. Engagement is built into our budget process, both before and after decisions are made. We've gathered feedback from our principals, teachers, support staff, students, families, and our community members through advisory groups, surveys, and community meetings. This year, more than 1,000 stakeholders participated in that process. So collecting feedback is important, but our responsibility is to take all of that feedback and input and balance it with the financial realities and the strategic priorities and make decisions that work for the system. This slide summarizes the feedback that we hear most often. 3 years into our strategic plan, the message is still consistent. Compensation matters, feeling appreciated and supported matters, and having tools and support to do the job well matters. When we step back and look at all these three things together, what it really points to is retention. So the important takeaway from that message is we will never recruit our way to our goals. We have to retain our staff. So recruitment brings people in the door, but retention is what creates stability in schools. And that stability allows student achievement to improve over time. So, and of course, compensation is a very big part of retention, and that's why you'll see it prioritized in this budget. It's not by accident, it's in direct response to what our employees in our community are telling us and also what the data is showing us. Now I want to pause here just for a second to underscore something fundamental. When we take care of our teachers, they can take care of our students. Teachers make the greatest impact on student outcomes, but too many of them are working 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to make ends meet. We cannot expect teachers to be fully focused on instruction if they're worried about whether they have enough money to live. If our goal is stability in schools and long-term gains in student achievement, we must ensure that teachers have the financial security and support they need. Investing in our people isn't just the right thing to do, it's the most impactful thing that we can do for students. Okay, so this slide shows the operating budget, which funds our day-to-day activities of the district. So our salaries, benefits, transportation, utilities, and our instructional support. So this is different from the entire budget, the total budget, which includes our capital projects, grants, and enterprise funds like child nutrition or after school. So our proposed operating budget is approximately $1.97 billion and supports approximately 139,000 students. This slide shows where the funding comes from and how it's used. As Dr. Hill indicated earlier, we do not have a budget this year, nor do we have a budget for 26-27. So we're making some assumptions when we're planning this budget. The assumptions that we made was a 3% increase for salaries based on the historical 5-year trend, and we're also assuming a 4.09% increase in benefits, looking at the history of the same 5 years. These are planning assumptions only, and this uncertainty is important as we talk through later about why some of the funds aren't allocated that Dr. Hill mentioned earlier. So charter school enrollment impacts our budget because local funds follow the student to the charter school. And so any increase in charter school enrollment increases the amount that we're required to pass through to the charter school. So before we started to ask for additional money, we looked internally. So as we shared earlier, we consistently hear from our employees that compensation and support matter, and we're committed to prioritizing those areas. So we ask ourselves, where can we make adjustments and trade-offs to redirect funding toward those priorities? So this supports our board guardrail 4, and that guardrail states, while ensuring all schools have teachers equipped to deliver high-quality instruction, the superintendent shall neither neglect targeted nor comprehensive strategies for teacher recruitment, retention, and engagement. So referencing the work of the trade-offs, so through that work, we identified approximately $6.6 million of trade-offs through central office reductions, vacant positions, and shared cost models for our digital platforms. These were not
And engagement. We've invited you here ahead of tonight's board meeting to learn about the proposed budget for the 26-27 school year. Our purpose for sharing this information is to provide you with the
educators when times are tight. Many districts across the state are cutting positions and/or have not been able to adjust their local supplement. So we want to acknowledge and thank both the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners for their continued commitment to investing in our educators, even during difficult financial times, because that consistency matters, and it matters for retention and it matters for stability in our schools. The next item is related to state-driven salary and benefit increases for locally funded employees. Remember the chart that Dr. Hill showed with the colors of locally, federal, and state-funded employees. We are assuming that 3% planning assumption based on historical trends, since we do not have a budget. When the state increases salaries, they fund those increases for state-funded positions only, so not for our locally funded positions. Those increases must be covered with local funds. So as we saw last year, or this year actually, the state doesn't always do what we expect. So, which is why it's important that we have a plan and we are prepared for different scenarios that might happen. So this is one of the biggest reasons we talked earlier about planning assumptions and uncertainty. We have to build that budget to handle the different scenarios. The final item on the list is of compensation is the phase 3 of the classified compensation study. This completes the multiple year effort to align our classified pay with market. Earlier phases address the largest employee groups, and the final phase focuses on specialized roles that are still not market competitive. So completing this phase finishes the work that we began and ensures our pay structures are competitive and fair across all roles. The next category is statutory required cost, primarily our charter school pass-through, which is required by law and is not discretionary. The final category is our operational needs, which includes the opening of our new schools and utility rate increases. These are essential costs required to operate our facilities. They are not program expansions, but simply the cost of running a district our size. Altogether, the total reoccurring expansion request is $31.1 million. However, we are able to apply $6 million in local funds that were set aside this year, 25-26, for state salary increases that did not occur, which reduces the actual amount of new reoccurring funding to a request of $25.1 to our county commissioners. This request is for one-time funds, which is why it's shown separately from the reoccurring list that we just addressed. This funding supports our ongoing efforts to maintain a sustainable student device replacement cycle. We continue to work in partnership with our county each year to move toward a long-term solution that is financially sustainable for both the district and the county. Reliable student devices are essential for instructional resources, assessments, and extended learning opportunities. This slide shows how we move from our current year appropriation at the county to our proposed 26-27 appropriation. So we'll start with the county reoccurring appropriation of $666.1 million, which is the direct allocation we have this fiscal year. Next, you'll see $1.4 million for fines and forfeitures. This is funding that passes through the county to CMS. In the past, we would have combined the county appropriation and the fines and forfeitures, but we have broken it out this year for clarity and transparency. We then add the $25.1 million in new reoccurring funding that we just discussed on the previous slide. And finally, then we add the $6 million of one-time request for student devices. When you combine those amounts, the total proposed operational county appropriation for 26-27 is $698.6 million. Million dollars, yes. A lot of zeros. So this shows the total proposed county appropriation that supports Dr. Hill's recommended budget for 26-27. So now that we've done operating budget, let's switch, which handles the day-to-day operations of the district. We're going to move to the capital outlay request, which funds our facility and our infrastructure needs. So our $32.9 million capital outlay request funds approximately 300 or estimated 305 projects that were identified using our facilities data from our deferred maintenance list and the needs outlined in our facility condition assessment. The largest investments focus on HVAC and site improvements with targeted work in plumbing, roofing, flooring, electrical, and paving. We've also allocated approximately 6% in contingency funds to address the unexpected and unforeseen needs, as well as help cover projects that may come in higher than initially estimated. The next section is our enterprise funds. These are self-sustaining programs such as school nutrition and after-school enrichment programs, which are primarily funded through user fees rather than local or state funds. The slight increase of 10 cents is recommended in the proposal for paid student meals related to rising food and labor costs. Many of our schools are CEP, I think the number's 115 schools, so students at those schools will continue to eat at no charge. The increase was carefully considered. Due to our federal requirements, paid meal prices must eventually align with the federal reimbursement rate. We currently have a waiver, but rather than risk a large increase in 1 year when the waiver expires, we are recommending small, gradual adjustments over time. Even with this increase, our price remains lower than many of the surrounding districts. There is no recommended increase for our after-school program. This brings everything together in a total recommended budget for 26-27. We've reviewed all the individual components, the operating, the capital, and the enterprise fund, and this section shows the full picture for the district. So as we've discussed throughout the presentation, the budget is built to support the strategic plan and board's goals. The numbers we just reviewed represent the financial side of the plan, but the work behind it is about strategy, outcome, and student success. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Thompson, who will walk through the theory of change and how our investments align to the board's goals.
Thank you, Chief Klutz. I am indeed going to walk you through how you can see these dollars being used specifically to accelerate student outcomes in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. We're going to continue to use our theory of change to prepare the 26-27 annual plan specific to goals 1, 2, and 3. We know that it's critical that we resource each of these inputs, each of the things that are on this slide next year, relative to our needed rates of improvement. It's important to note that these things are not new. They are part of a longer-term, multi-year strategy, and they are producing results. High-quality specialists is first on our theory of change, and they're essential to providing training and development to our high-quality literacy and math master teachers and school-based classroom teachers. The total anticipated investment for the upcoming school year is $13.1 million. This is based on an average specialist salary with benefits and specifically supports goals 1, 2, 3, and guardrail 1. High-quality literacy and math master teachers are essential to providing job-embedded training and development to our high-quality literacy and math classroom teachers. The total anticipated investment for the upcoming school year is $30.4 million. This is based on an average master teacher salary with benefits and similarly supports goals 1, 2, 3, and guardrail 1. When we look at high-quality teacher professional development, this includes all professional development for teachers outside of what is being provided by master teachers at the school level. The anticipated input for the upcoming school year for continued implementation of our instructional onboarding initiative called Crown Academy is $0.8 million. This supports goals 1, 2, 3, and guardrails 1 and 4. We know we need to ensure there's a high-quality classroom teacher in every classroom to achieve our annual targets. And we're thrilled to have a 99.7% fill rate at this moment in time. Whether the position is a classroom teacher or one of our teacher leader pathway positions, an expanded impact teacher, the core function is the same: provide high-quality instruction to students. The anticipated investments here are $293.3 million. These investments support goals 1, 2, 3, and guardrails 1 and 4. Next is high-quality core instruction. Anticipated inputs for the 26-27 year include ongoing costs to provide curricular resources to teachers and to students, devices for students, and extended learning opportunities for students. The total anticipated investment is $30.7 million. These inputs support goals 1, 2, and 3, as well as guardrail 1. Next, we have student engagement. A continuation of our multi-year implementation of a district-wide framework to ensure our school environments foster student well-being, counselors, social workers, and psychologists who provide core, supplemental, and intensive services within school buildings to support student success, and school-based safety and security staff, such as behavior modification technicians and campus security associates who provide supports in our schools to ensure safe schools environment. The total anticipated investment for these inputs is $98.1 million. And finally, we have family engagement, ensuring family and guardians' understanding of student progress and how to use available resources to extend learning within and outside of the school day is essential to student success. A key input for the 26-27 school year will continue to be Family Academy with an anticipated investment of $0.8 million. This is aligned to goals 1, 2, 3, and guardrail 1. In conclusion, we have the key inputs that are absolutely essential to achieve our goals. Each of these needs to be in place. We can't forsake any of them. And our ongoing student outcomes-focused governance monitoring reports indicate that these inputs are indeed producing results. We also have to invest in what's needed for our broader organization, and we'll do that while keeping our focus and priority on student outcomes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Financial Officer Klutz.
Thank you, Chief Thompson. So this slide is about how we move forward. The expectation is not just financial discipline, but it's operational discipline and continuous improvement. So we have to keep asking ourselves if we're organized the right way, if we're using resources the right way, and if we're getting the outcomes that we expect. This is how we protect our investments, stay aligned with the board's goals, and ultimately move from being a good organization to a great organization. This budget book is available later tonight when the board meeting goes live, and provides comprehensive details about the financial plan, priorities, and funding allocations that support the recommendation. The book includes several different views to support your understanding, transparency, and comparability. It includes detailed expenditures by funding source and by fund, so that you can see how the funds are allocated and spent within each fund. It also includes revenue by funding source, which shows where the funding comes from, whether that's state, local, federal, or some other funding source. The book also includes a proposed county appropriation current expense report, which is presented in the purpose function format. This is the legal format that's adopted by the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners, and it shows what funding supports, such as instruction, support services, transportation, maintenance, operations, or administration. This document also includes prior year comparison, as well as fund descriptions and category descriptions for your reference. The document is being presented to our board and the public today for review, and the board will not be expected to vote until April the 28th, which is approximately 5 weeks from today. So you'll have a minute to.
Hey everyone, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break. We'll come back to this CMS budget meeting right after this. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're going to go back to the CMS budget meeting right now.
Present the budget in multiple ways so that it's transparent, easy to understand, and easy to compare year over year. So as I close, the budget reflects the path that we've taken to get here. We started with the board's goals. We listened to our stakeholders. We made trade-offs internally first, and we prioritized people because people drive student outcomes. We were bringing forward a disciplined, responsible budget that aligns to the board's goals and supports students. This slide shows the timeline and what happens next, including the public hearing, the board adoption, and the presentation to the county. So now I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hill to close.
Thank you so much, Chief Klutz, for that thorough presentation and for your steady leadership throughout the budget process. Your guidance and expertise has made all the difference, and I really appreciate how you've kept us grounded and informed as we navigate the shifts in funding sources and expectations. This concludes what we wanted to share with you all today, and now I will turn it over to Assistant Communications Officer Tom Miner to facilitate questions.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Hill. We also want to thank you, our media partners, for being here with us today to help cover this important information. We've shared a lot of significant information in detail with you here, and now we will transition into a question and answer section. We will begin with a first round of questions, followed by a second and final round. For additional questions, any related or unrelated, please see me after the press conference or send us an email to media@cms.k12.nc.us. We can help you. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. If you will, please name yourself and your outlet with your question. Rebecca.
Hey, Rebecca Noel, Charlotte Observer. My question is about the 5% average supplement increase, just sort of breaking that down a little bit further, because I know that for example, in the state salary schedule, they don't get a raise between year 15 or 25 or after year 25. So I guess that 5% average, how is that broken down within that based on, years of experience?
Thank you, Rebecca, for that question. Let me give a little bit of context, and then I'll let Chief Klutz explain. So every year I've been superintendent, I've requested a 5% supplement increase. And the way we determine how it's going to be used is through the engagement. So the very first year that we did it, we had a heavy emphasis on beginning teachers because our beginning teachers were so under the living wage. We really needed to provide a bump for them to move them up. So the first year we focused on that. Then after that, of course, we began to hear concerns from all other teachers, veteran teachers. You referenced that at year 15 to year 25, our teachers on the state salary schedule get a negligible increase. It's essentially zero. So if you have 15 years experience, you're 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, zero raise from a state perspective. The supplement, of course, is on top of that to support. So we have, based on feedback, we're doing an average of 5% from year 0 to 30 plus. So I'll let Chief Klutz talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. I pulled up a slide that we used in our March 10th budget presentation. And so the yellow line is CMS's proposed budget. So once we apply the 5% increase to the average, the average teacher supplement, you can see the line. The blue line is where we stand. Sorry. The blue line is where we are today. And you can see we basically just lifted the line in all areas, 0, 5, 10, 15, 25, 30. And you can see that we are competitive. These are the highest supplementals in the state of North Carolina, so Chapel Hill, Carrboro, as well as Wake. We've made significant improvement over Wake simply because Wake has not been able to increase theirs in the last couple of years where we have been, which speaks to the consistency of the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners on the impact that it actually does. You can see that in the visual here. So we've also talked about our commitment to compensation and the 20 to 30, the 15 to 30 years, and that's an ongoing conversation, and we're committed to that. And that's an ongoing conversation, and we're committed to that.
To your point, Rebecca, sorry, I just want to jump back to that. So if you see Chapel Hill, Carrboro, see how that line jumps up? They're doing that in direct response to the question that you lifted.
James.
James out of WFA. Quick kind of technical question. I was looking at this presentation from last year and trying to compare the county allocation. I didn't see the charter pass-through funding listed in last year's presentation. Is that different this year? Can you explain that?
Yes, that's a great question. So the state took school districts from a funding in a forward motion to a funding in arrears. And so now, what used to happen is the state used to project our enrollment, and we would get the funding for those projected students. That is not the way that it's done any longer. We get the funding for the students that are in our school now, in this fiscal year, 25-26, for our 26-27. So it's in arrears, it's a year delay. We moved to the same model with the charter school funding. So last year, you'll see that I didn't request additional dollars from the charter school growth. So it's because we went from a forward-facing to a rear-facing.
Got it. Thanks.
Katie Solt, ABTV. We've just heard from the governor last week about his frustration with the lack of a state budget. So for parents at home, can you guys just, I hate to use the phrase, but dumb it down for parents as to why it matters when we do or do not have a state budget as it specifically pertains to teacher funding and teacher salaries?
Yes. In anticipation of that question, thank you, we put together a visual. It's not part of the budget presentation, but it's something that we put together in anticipation of that question.
So why state increases matter the most? So if a teacher, so we wanted to get down to the basics, right? So if a teacher makes $100, we want to do easy math, right? So if a teacher makes $100, the state is responsible for the base pay for that teacher, right? That represents in Charlotte, for a beginning teacher, Charlotte-Mecklenburg, $84 of that $100, so 84%. Locally, there's a $16 supplement out of that $100, and so that's paid by the county commissioners. So 84% of a teacher's pay and a beginning teacher's pay in Charlotte-Mecklenburg is supported by the state. $16 is supported locally. So what happens if you get a 5% pay increase, so we're going to increase the supplement 5%, and that's great, and we've done that for, this will be the 4th year, and that's consistently great, and that matters. But what matters more is the larger piece of the pie is what the state participates in. That's 84% of their pay. So when they get a 5% increase on state pay, it is more meaningful than it is when we adjust local pay. It is more meaningful to the tune of 5 times more meaningful. So we could have done that 5 years, and the state could have done it 1 year to have the same impact. So what we're saying is that the state has a 5 times more impact, larger impact on teacher pay and the speed in which we can get teachers to a minimum living wage or appropriate salary by 5 times. And so when both the state and the local, that's what we want, is the local and the state moving in the same direction. So with a similar adjustment to teacher salaries, we would get a teacher from $100 to $105 in 1 year if everyone contributed 5%. But just the local portion, when we're doing it alone, we do not move because we have a smaller piece of the pie. And then I would take you back to the way that the tax structure is set up, right? The foundational formula is that the state tax provides the base pay for the teacher. So state taxes that we pay this blue part. Local taxes that we pay this green part. We've got to have both moving in the same direction to have meaningful impact. We need the same effort from local and county. So I hope that answers your question as to why that matters. Do you want to see this one? And this just applies that theory. So Dr. Hill has recommended for, this is the 4th year, so we have 3 years, and then this year, 4 years. So it applies the effect of the matching. So if the state would have provided a 5% increase for the last 3 years and this coming year, 26, 27, and Charlotte-Mecklenburg also applied the 5% increase last 3 years and this coming years, we would have actually gotten a beginning teacher at living wage. It's not an extraordinary ask, it's just consistent progress toward the goal.
And can I just add a little bit more to that? It was beautiful. So I just want to say that it's and. So it's, and I think Kelly spoke to that. We need state, we have to have the blue, and you also have to have the green. The local is really intended to take care of the local context. Example, a teacher that lives here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and a teacher perhaps that lives in Union County, their state pay is exactly the same. But it's much more expensive to live in Charlotte-Mecklenburg than it is in some parts of Union County, which is why we have that local supplement to account for the local difference. But the point is, if we don't impact pay at the state level, we'll never be able to supplement our way out of the pay issue that we have. So we have to have both, which is why I always say I'll continue to ask for 5%. So even if the state raises the pay, I will still ask for 5% because, again, teacher in Mecklenburg County, teacher in Union County, they have to make more here than they make in Union County. We want people to live here, not just work here.
Charlton Wilson, Spectrum News. Outside of salaries, how is the lack of a state budget affecting the budget proposal, and what changes will be noticeable for families with the proposed budget?
It's salaries.
Yeah, it's salaries, but it's all the things. So the state budget pays for pays for resources for students. It pays for some of the assessments that we have, like IB assessments that students take based on their courses for International Baccalaureate. You think of?
I would say one of the more difficult things is that the mini bill increased the benefits associated. So the mini bills, rather than a budget bill, was passed, and we have increased costs due to the benefit increases. However, we were not afforded the same opportunity to have increased revenues, right? So cost of living, everything that we do is going up. So we were provided with more expense, but no additional opportunity for revenue.
The biggest piece is salaries because it's the biggest part of our budget. So when you look at that allocation, we're a people business, so that's our biggest. That's the biggest line item, but it does impact resources for students as well, as I mentioned.
Any additional questions for round one? All right, we'll start round two with Rebecca.
Yeah, that 1.45 million in fines and forfeitures, I know you mentioned that's been in there before, just not like explicitly broken out, but can you explain like what those are or what that's going towards?
Sure. Have you ever received a speeding ticket?
That's a personal question.
Do you know anybody that's ever received a speeding ticket? So a portion of those fines comes to the school district, and so another example of that would be, you know how the trucks on the interstate are weighed. If they weigh over, there's a fine. We get that's a pass-through that comes to us.
James.
On the slide about the identified trade-offs, the 26 central office support staff, can you clarify, are those vacant positions or those people that are being laid off, or what are we losing from that trade-off?
Yeah, so the positions are filled. Those 26 are filled. Those people will have a different position. They're not being laid off. It's not a reduction in force. They are being placed in another vacant position, if that's what they choose to do, that's comparable to what they're doing right now. The positions that are vacant would be the ones that we've mentioned, the transportation monitors. So those were vacant positions, but we have an opportunity to ensure that those are captured through an additional funding source.
You mentioned obviously recruitment and retention for teachers. Just talk about maybe the struggles you're seeing with keeping teachers right now. I came from a state where it was extremely competitive within the state to keep teachers in a district. What are you all experiencing, and is this part of the salary push to get it up above Chapel Hill, Wake, those other competitive markets, if you will?
I'll let Chief Thompson speak because she's doing 2 jobs right now. So.
Yeah. Yes and yes to that. The State of the Teaching Profession report just came out, which is the state's annual report, kind of like we do in September when we talk about student outcomes. This would have been the state's annual report that talked about attrition rates, how many teachers left. They report that out at the state level and then for every LEA or every district throughout the state of North Carolina. We saw a teeny uptick in attrition in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, as did the entire state of North Carolina. In fact, every surrounding county, with the exception of one, also saw an uptick. In other words, more teachers left last year than had the previous year. The top 2 reasons that were cited in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools for leaving were on-schedule retirements. And so we're going to be watching that very carefully. We don't fault people for retiring. They certainly deserve to be able to retire. And we need to plan accordingly to know when those larger than normal numbers of retirements are coming, and then be able to have strong recruitment and retention strategy around that. The second reason was around career changes. When we asked why people were making those career changes, the number 1 reason was inadequate compensation. We do some surveying outside of that State of the Teaching Profession report each year, and other things that are lifted outside of retirement and compensation are appreciation and recognition and work-life balance. So we are concerned. We continue to redouble our efforts to be able to support teachers, and we like to say in all the ways, because there is no one-stop shop that's going to support recruitment and retention of our teachers in the ways that they deserve to be treated and retained. It's our goal to be the number 1 best place to work in Mecklenburg County, and we're going to continue to double down on what those efforts look like moving forward. One interesting thing that we are watching is, in light of kind of what the hiring season is going to look like across the region, it is interesting to watch with the number of ADM or positions that are allocated across our surrounding counties. What we're seeing is that there are fewer positions vacant and or available as we head into next year. So it's going to be very interesting to watch what this hiring season looks like. We've got let me give a plug. We got 2 big events coming up. April 2nd, our Priority School Career Fair, and then April 18th is our big career fair, and our leaders are getting ready to be able to hire, network, and to be able to develop relationships with candidates. So put out the word for us. We're expecting to see a big crowd.
Any additional questions for round 2? All right. Well, thank you. Just a quick reminder here, this slide deck that you have copies of is available on Board Docs through the CMS website. However, this information is embargoed. We wanted to provide you with additional insights, context, and information to allow you to plan and prepare for accurate and factual reporting. Please do not release this information until the close of the board meeting.
Can I say something, Tom?
Yes.
Sorry.
By all means.
So this will be available on Board Docs at 5:50 p.m. So you all are very special because you are the only ones that have this deck. So again, please.
All right, everyone. We're going to go to another 2-minute break, and we will have more for you right here on WCNC Plus. We'll see you in 2. All right, folks, we are back. As you probably saw, and if you haven't, Sheriff Page winning the Senate seat here in North Carolina against Phil Berger. Phil Berger conceding the race a couple of hours ago. Let's listen in here because both Sheriff Page actually was speaking about Mr. Berger's concession not too long ago. So we'll go to this right now.
Just a little while ago, around 4 o'clock, I received a call from Phil Berger, Senator Phil Berger, and basically his message was that he was letting me know that he was going to concede in the race for the Senate seat, District 26. He told me, wish me best of luck and in the future and as we move forward to November. And I likewise thanked him for his contributions that he's done as our senator representing us here in Rockingham County and in Guilford County. He also did tell me that the protests that we had that were scheduled in Guilford and Rockingham County, he was going to ask his legal team to go ahead and pull those back and again then concede in the race. So just kind of absorbing all this right now because it's kind of come kind of quick. So, any questions? Go ahead with some questions, please.
Hi. So this is Chris Peterson with WXI TV in Winston-Salem.
Yes, sir.
I know you said, Sheriff, that this is raw. This just happened, but I guess just your reaction to that phone call and the fact that Senator Berger conceded. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I'm very appreciative. I've known Senator Berger for many years as a practicing attorney. I knew him as a practicing attorney in the mid '80s, all the way to the present, and through his career. But I was very appreciative to hear that. I was concerned how far we were going to be going because today, they did a lot of hand counts of some ballots in some select precincts in Guilford and Rockingham County, and I knew that's very tedious, and also I know it's very costly. So, I was concerned about pretty much how long we were going to be going with this process. But when he called me, I didn't expect it today, but I am appreciative, and I thanked him for doing so.
Sheriff Page, Brian Anderson here with the Assembly. Just in terms of the amount of money spent in this race, the cash disadvantage that you had, can you just talk about, just some of the obstacles that you had encountered in taking someone out who has been a longtime leader in the state, had a plethora of resources, and just the obstacles that you had to overcome to get to this position?
Yes, sir. Well, I think I pretty said early on that I recognize this. As far as the funding issues and stuff, that was going to be an issue because again, I knew that my opponent was very, very well funded, and I made the statement early on that I've worked hard over the past 28 years as sheriff, and of the total time of about 43 years in law enforcement plus in Rockingham County, building relationships through my work as an officer, as a deputy, as a police officer, and then also as the sheriff for the past 28 years. So we built those relationships, and that's what I said was, this race will not be won on money's race. It will be won on relationships that we've established and built, and the trust we built over the past 28 years as sheriff with the citizens. And I think it truly rang true as we talk today.
Thanks, Chair. And just a reminder, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We're going to do our best to call everybody. And if you'd like another interview again after this, please email me and we'll arrange that too. Let's go to Michael with WTVD ABC Raleigh.
Patrick, thank you. Sheriff, congratulations. This has been a drawn-out process. I know throughout it all, just from our conversations, you have voiced consistent confidence. Is there a sense of relief that we're at this point? Was there ever a sense of concern as this recount process was playing out that the results may not be in your favor? And separately, what is your message to voters who have kind of been tracking this for the past few weeks and prior to the election, certainly for months as it was garnering attention?
Well, I've spoken to a lot of people, a lot of our citizens that are following this race in Rockingham and Guilford County. The same conversations is, when is it over? When does it stop? You won. And so I said this. I said, look, I'm very confident from the very first, when we saw that we won that night by two votes. I said, we're in it. We're in it to win it. And as the votes kept coming on, as this processes continue, we've seen more votes tallying up. I said, I felt even more, it just helped me with my confidence. I said, you know what, we're going to win this. But I go back to the original conversation is, it's not all about the money raised. It's about the relationship and the trust that you build in your community. Whether you're elected official or sheriff or any other position where you're working as a public servant, is you build relationships, and you can build some long-lasting relationships. And I think that's what we saw. I think our citizens came out, their trust was there, they showed their support. And now, when the first 2 votes came out, everybody wanted to claim those 2 votes. And I told them, I said, well, we appreciate you because your vote counted. But if that ever rang true more than ever you've ever heard this, every vote counts, and we saw that. And I just truly appreciate everybody coming out, putting their trust. I appreciate every prayer that we heard. There were a lot of people who were calling me and offering prayers and support, and also just I've had people send me just whatever they could send me to help us during our campaign. And every dollar made a difference, but also every vote made a difference, but also every prayer, primarily every prayer, made a difference in this race. I don't know, Patrick.
Is that Caroline Yaffa of WRAL?
Yeah, sorry. I'm joined on my phone. Thank you. Sheriff Page, what can you say about your phone call and specifics? Can you talk a little bit about what went down during that phone call? I know you said briefly about how he said that he was going to withdraw his protests and that he was conceding, but is there any more specifics? Was there something specifically he told you that he wants you to do or anything?
No, ma'am. I think Senator Berger was very cordial, and of course I was appreciative to him making the decision he made. I'm glad that we didn't have to continue the processes, because I think when you get into it, then you get into the cost, the time people are involved in these processes, in the election process, and then of course the taxpayer. I don't believe in wasting money and tax dollars. No, we don't need now as ever. We don't need to waste any money. But I was very appreciative, and I wanted to relay that to him, that I do appreciate him doing what he did. He was a gentleman, and he was very cordial. And again, Senator Berger and myself just left from a ribbon cutting or a ceremony for a new industry in Rockingham County, and of course several elected officials and several officials from the new company TASEA spoke, and I was listening. Governor Stein was there, and I got to talk to several people and see some people I hadn't seen in a while. And again, I just wanted to thank everybody for their support and understanding as we move through this process. And then, of course, I did see Senator Berger, didn't get a chance to talk to him, but then about 45 minutes to an hour later, I got a call from Senator Berger, and that's when he called me and told me that he would be conceding.
Deanna from CBS 17. Got a bad connection. Sheriff, I don't know if that's just me or.
I can't understand it.
Yeah, maybe call back on another phone. It's very muffled.
Hey, now does it sound better without my headphones?
There you go.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Sheriff Page, congratulations. Thank you for giving us a few minutes today. You obviously still have to get through November, but if you are into the General Assembly, talk to us about some of the top priorities you have going into your first session.
Well, first of all, I do have to custom myself to the General Assembly. I have worked with the General Assembly through the North Carolina Sheriff's Association over the past 28 years, and of course over the past 14 years with the Sheriff's Association Executive Committee, and so I've had some experience there. But I'm still learning persons and learning how the situations operate, and it's going to be a learning curve. But at the end of the day, it's about building relationships and learning to work together to come to a common agreement where what we can do to help the citizens in our state, in our district, and always putting the citizens in our district first, because that's who you work for. They're your bosses.
Jack,
I'm sorry.
Sure thing. Jack from WFMY, if you'll unmute.
Hey, Sheriff. Hey, Sheriff Page.
Hey, Jack.
As the focus now turns to November, what do you say to voters who supported your opponent, Phil Berger, as now you represent their party?
Well, I would appreciate their consideration for their vote and their support as we move forward in November. I'll be working on my thoughts and ideas as developing those and continuing those that information, putting it out to the citizens across the district, what I stand for, what I'd like to do. But I can tell you just basically public safety and education are probably my top two priorities.
Colin Campbell.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the election process and given some of the concerns that have been raised about other elections, concerns that Senator Berger's team raised about undervotes and overvotes and things in this race. How confident should voters be about how effective and accurate our election process is in this state after the recount process we just went through?
Well, I've never had to go through this level of process because, like I said, in the sheriff's race, you generally that night you know where you stand, you know you've won and stuff like that. But it was a new experience. I had some concerns, and of course I think I had good reason to have concerns. As we worked through it, I got to see the professionals at the Rockingham County Board of Elections and the Guilford County Board of Elections and the volunteers to watch how they do their jobs and how each job is important as you move through the count process and the identification of the ballots and the process. It's not a simple thing, and I know it's tedious, but at the end of the day, we do need to thank everybody that works at the Board of Elections for the hard work they do because it's a tough job. I sat today and watched about 500 ballots being counted and information being relayed back and forth between the persons that were tracking that data, and it's a tough job, but I will say this is I felt like in Rockingham County and in Guilford County where we have our district is that everyone was transparent. They explained very well what they were doing before they did it, so it was very educational. But at the end of the day, I think we have a lot of professionals that work in the Board of Elections, and we appreciate them. I've said in America we should always expect a free and fair election, and I think we saw that. I did talk to Auditor Dave Bullock a little bit ago. We had a conversation, and I told him I appreciate him. He was telling me some of the things they were doing to help and I told him the reason why I have my concerns. I don't think it's been any secret to that. I have my concerns, but at the end of the day, I want to see us to continue to work forward and toward November so we can begin our work in the Senate, helping our citizens across our state and across our district. It's very important.
Just a reminder, just raise your hand on the Zoom if you have a question for the sheriff, and we'll do our best to call on you. And to email me if you want more of like a one-on-one, we can do that as well. But for now, we're going to do this. If Adam Wagner can unmute.
Hey, Sheriff, congratulations.
Hey, Adam, thank you, sir.
I'm wondering if in your conversations with voters since Election Day, if you've gotten a sense that voters were more voting for what you stood for or against what they perceive Senator Berger to stand for?
Well, I think anytime you run for office, you're going to have some persons voting for you, or some people could get upset with a candidate and turn to someone else. But I think we have a solid core of voters in Rockingham County because that most of our highest number of votes were in Rockingham County, and because the citizens know me, they've known me over the past 28 years as sheriff, so they've got to learn who I am, what I stand for, and the thing is now my job is to learn and to educate and to build those relationships across Guilford County and the district, so people have a better understanding of what I stand for. But at the end of the day, I stand for what is right, I stand for what is just, I stand for what is fair, but I never forget who I work for and who my bosses are, and I serve the will of the people. And I think if you can remember those things, I think you can do fine. But again, like I said, some people may be against you, some people may be for you. Sometimes you may vote on something or do something that their persons don't like. But you got to remember, every time that you do something in the legislature, it affects somebody. Just like every time we do something in law enforcement, it affects somebody's lives and the lives of our citizens in our community. So you just got to be conscientious of when you make decisions. think them through, and make sure it's the best decision when you're thinking about what you're doing for our citizens. Always try to make your best decision.
Andy Spate.
Hey, Sheriff Page.
Hey, Andy.
How are you, sir? Congratulations. My question is about just fitting in Raleigh. Somebody else had talked about, whether or not you'll be able to be welcomed in the Senate caucus down there among the Republicans. Do you have any concerns about that? I know you've been down there to advocate for legislation, but I imagine there are a lot of Senator Berger's friends there that may not be as happy to see you as some other people. So how do you plan to deal with that?
Well, I guess I will be myself. I won't change my person, because I don't think you should change your person. You should be the person that people expect you to be. And but I will say this, is I'm a reasonable person. I'm receptive. I will listen. And I always want to try to do what's best for our citizens, but I also believe in listening to our citizens when you're thinking about legislation and how they're going to be impacted, to listen to the citizens and stuff. I would encourage our representatives to be more attentive to the citizens and their concerns versus lobbyists and special interests, because I think that's where you get in a bind, where you're paying more attention to outside your district than in your district, and that's when you have trouble in anything you do. So keep focused on what your job is. Make sure you remember who you work for, and also make sure you always keep it in mind when you are making those serious decisions that are going to impact lives. I would like to say one thing. I hadn't said this, but I think the legislature is going back in session. I don't know the exact date, but in April. 21st. When is that? 21st. The 21st of April. But one thing I would like for them to do is this. Number one, to set a budget. That is one of the biggest conversations I'm hearing across the state. Is 80,000 state employees and no budget, and other things depend on those budgets. So there are a lot of people that are important, that do a lot of people across the state that work for the state that do important things to help run the government, make sure it's happening, looking after our citizens. And let's make sure that we go ahead and get that budget set. And from this point forward, let's shoot for July 1. Let's work together to shoot for July 1 instead of dragging it out. We should be able to have a budget set every year by July 1. And I think that would be a goal of mine, to work with other senators to encourage them to consider doing that.
I think we had a question from Lauren from WGHP. I don't know if she was able to raise her hand or not, but she just asked, what do you want to say to voters and what's your plan for November? Lauren, if you want to say that in your own words, feel free to unmute. But otherwise, Sheriff, if you want to answer.
If there's no response, I'll say this. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. She just asked that through the chat, so feel free to answer as you please.
I would say this is we've got a few months between now and November, and my intent is to get into Guilford County and across Rockingham County and continue to listen and ask what people are most concerned about and what I possibly can do and what I can bring to them from the legislature. And again, like I said, is there's a lot of things going on in my mind right now, because like I said, this is day one. It's just kind of a lot on me right now. But again, my top priorities, I've always said, has been public safety, looking after our educational system, our mental health system in North Carolina, our different social services that we provide to our citizens, because it's very important. Branching out for that, I've got a lot of concerns, but I think the first thing I'd like to see starting in April, even before I even go in, is I'd like to see the House members and the senators come together and the governor to sign a budget. And let's get back on the process and start looking out for our employees that help look after our citizens here across North Carolina in our district.
Okay. Someone just asked me if they meant like their actual hand. I meant their virtual hand on Zoom. So just press the button on Zoom and we'll continue. Chris Peterson.
Sheriff, you just mentioned the budget several times. Do you feel that issue, or maybe was there another issue that turned the tide of this election in your favor?
Well, we can go back. I think that people still, our citizens still have not gotten over the issues about gambling, expansion, gaming, casinos, stuff like that. and anything else that may come, there doesn't appear to be a conservative value that was brought forward and stuff like this. If we're going to be, as a Republican, if we're going to be conservative, then we need to be conservative, and we need to have conservative values and express that. But some of the things in the past, I don't think they were off the table, and I was concerned about those coming back and the impact it was going to have on the citizens in our individual communities across the state and across our county, stuff like this. And again, let the people in the district have a voice. Listen to them and listen to what they have to say, and honor the will of the people. That's what we got to get back to doing. Is we got to honor the will of the people in our districts.
Caroline?
Yeah, Sheriff Page, you mentioned that you spoke with the state auditor, Dave Bullock. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that specific conversation was like? Any details that came up? Did y'all talk about specifically the fact that you said that he should recuse himself from this process with your?
Well, I think that state auditor recognized where my concerns were and why I had my concerns. I think he was trying, in his conversation with me, gave me the impression that he was trying to show me that there have been some efforts made to make sure that the integrity is maintained within the system. And I will say this is, when I saw some of the appeals and the concerns that were going up from the Burger team that were going up to the Board of Elections, and then listen to those cases or the hearings, seeing the rulings and their position, it gave me a lot more confidence in the system, because I felt like everybody was on a fair playing ground. And again, like I said, it's a free and fair election is what everybody expects. But Mr. Bullock called me.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break. We'll come back right after this. All right, everyone, welcome back. We're going to go back to Sheriff Sam Page, who just won the recount against Phil Berger.
And I'm sure I'll be talking to him again. And again, I just want to make sure that we follow the law, to make sure that we look after our citizens, that we took an oath to abide and protect, and want to just make sure we uphold the laws and we follow our oaths. I mean, that's the most important thing you can do as an elected official, is when you take that oath to abide by it and stand by it.
Brian?
Yes, thank you. I had one political and one substantive policy one for you. Just, the State Board of Elections, they declined to leapfrog this process as Berger had wanted. They said, we're not going to do the full hand recount. We're not going to do the selective hand recount. We're going to go through the process as outlined by state law. So I'm curious from your perspective what you think of the fairness if this process was fair and by the book. And then on policy, I'm just curious. You talked about the budget. What do you make of the current budget debate on taxes and whether those triggers should be done going forward?
Well, on the budget. Oh, just one second. All right, let me tell you this. On the budget, I watched what the House, their plan was versus the Senate plan, and I think I was more supportive of the Senate plan because I think that it was not as quite a decrease in tax, such a sharp decrease that would put you in a situation that if other things occur and triggers didn't occur, that you could get in a shortfall. If you get into a shortfall, then you're going to have to start looking for other ways to raise revenue. And I think that the House plan was more conservative in that process, and that's why I supported that. Okay, on that. What was the other question again? I want to hear that again. The other question.
Yeah, just on the State Board of Elections.
On the rules.
Yeah, they declined Berger's request to leapfrog the process. Does that instill some confidence in you with the State Board of Elections?
It did, and of course this has been brought up. Well, I understand that Senator Berger has some play in the change in some of the rules and processes, recent few years, couple years, whatever, but in the past have changed some of the rules. And so the thing is, but when you change the rules, that's still the rules. You got to go by them. And so when they held firm on that, that gave me a good sign. That I did feel better about that because I said, you know what, they're holding everybody, regardless, to the rules, and that's why we have laws and that's why we have rules to be followed. And I was appreciative when I heard that, saw that.
All right. Anyone else have any other questions? It looks like I don't see a hand up, virtual hand up. Does anyone else have any other questions at all? Otherwise, I think Sheriff's going to do some other interviews outside.
Patrick, I'm going to say one thing before everybody goes is I appreciate the media coverage. I think all the media involved and getting involved in following this processes from the Board of Elections also help with the transparency, because we got to see some things that we don't see the races like this every time. You don't have drawn out races and stuff like this and processes all the time. So I think all the news services contributed to the helping on that transparency issue. And I want to say thank you. I worked with the media for 28 years as sheriff, and I think we've had some great relationships being able to get our message out. Sometimes not so good, sometimes, and a lot of times good, but I appreciate you. And I thank you for doing that, not only for the Board of Elections, but also for the citizens out here, because again, that's who we work for. They're our bosses, and they need to know what's going on, how it works. And I appreciate you for doing that. I'm good, Patrick.
All right, thanks everybody. I think you know how to get in contact with. If you want to contact me, anything with the sheriff, give me an email at patrick@tarieltargeting.com. Otherwise, we'll all be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is your producer, Sean. We'll take a break.
All right, folks, ending our break a little bit early. We do want to get to Governor Josh Stein, who was just here in North Carolina speaking not too long ago. We'll go to this. We don't have long, but listen in right now.
Some exciting announcements to come. But it is such a thrill to start with this announcement here in rural North Carolina, because when we think about our strategy for economic development, it begins and ends with ensuring that we have opportunity in every single corner of the state, places like where I grew up in Williamston and places like this in Eden. So with this announcement, we know it could be happening anywhere in the world, but it's happening right here because this is a community with a strong manufacturing legacy and prowess and a keen understanding of the partnerships necessary for a project like this to succeed. What makes our economic development effort